What felt really interesting about starting with the notion of poetics was that poetry is text that then conjures images in our minds. But so many artists are working in ways that start with an image, but then conjures stories and words and whole worlds in the minds of the viewer. This international exhibition brings together more than 100 artists to think about notions of home and community, but also displacement from one home to another, and to really use diaspora as a frame to think about a dispersal of cultures, not in terms of a dilution, but in terms of them kind of pooling and reforming in other places and what that means.
Translations is particularly relevant and poignant in this moment in time to think about the things that bring us together rather than separate us. It's also the largest exhibition to date that has happened in Singapore and perhaps in the Southeast Asia region to focus on the conversation between African and Asian diasporic artists.
The painting behind me speaks about separation and boundaries within a relationship, and it taught me a lot how to become a father. One part that I'm happy about, especially when I come to Asia, I'm always intrigued by the notion of family. And again, the convergence of ideas that put us back to the point of humanity. And I think family is the main seed before you develop anything else. Once you have that structure, you have a point where you can lean back on.
For translations Afro-Asian Poetics, I had a long conversation with Yifeinwa Chamonwu, who's an African artist. She was sharing with me how in Africa, keloids are just an outcome of marks on skin, and they use it as a form of identification between family members and tribes. While in Singapore, for us, keloids are something to be medically treated. So the difference and contrast in the way we treat the idea of keloid scar produced these three works. For me, I thought about what it means to carry scars and narratives on our backs, in contrast with Ife's presentation of a woman being very proud of her scars. For the scroll works, I was thinking about the effects of language and how words can cut, can heal, can haunt.
A fun addition in each of the 5 exhibition spaces has been a haiku or a pantun or an excerpt of a poem. One of the fascinating starting points for me was thinking about the fact that in Chinese culture, you speak of writing a painting, and the viewer is deemed someone who is reading the painting.
Poetics is really critical to the whole endeavor of art making in East Asia. In poetics, we think of language, and we think of calligraphy, and we think of writing. So this whole notion of the poetics of the painting is central to the way in which the ink art language works.
We were thinking much more in this show about shared approaches to materials, very different ways of thinking about how to use a quilted surface, a painting surface, to applique onto a work. And ultimately, all of that is to tell a story.
For me, the referencing of the body as a vessel and this parallel between the body, the way it is malleable and yet it cracks and breaks and fissures, is all very parallel to the way my material functions. There is that relationship between the vessel and the material, and the body and the material.
The exhibition is also a great opportunity to provide an internationally important kind of conversation that takes center stage in Singapore, and introducing some of the local artists as well as regionally based artists into this wider sort of context. The exhibition takes place as part of Singapore Art Week, where we have a confluence of different people visiting and have a chance to witness a kind of growth and experiment taking place in the local art scene. We were also fortunate to be able to extend the exhibition and its investigations to partner with F&B partners, including the Michelin-starred restaurant, Restaurant Nori, as well as beloved local brand, Premier. We really wanted to work together to think about how Afro-Asia, as an area of investigation, of cultural crossovers, to be experienced not just in the exhibition, but also in scent and in taste.
Singapore is an important crossroads in Southeast Asia. Singaporean culture is itself an amalgamation of many cultures and many languages made it seem like an apt location to think about how we might stage this convening and gathering of many different people. It was also very important for us to include Singaporean artists in the exhibition and from across generations.
New Worlds is about how nature in Singapore is kind of often really close to the city. The work is presenting one such story where deforestation and the birth of a wild boar is taking place just side by side each other. Very happy to see that this little story from Singapore can be seen within a wider context of the Afro-Asian exhibition.
I've been thinking about creating a series of haiku films. This is the first. I chose a young woman to speak my thoughts and again expressing what it means to be kind of like a voice moving through a landscape as well and thinking about the ways that we make home or we feel homeless or we feel unhomed.
As an artist, it's great to work on something that gives direct impact to the community and also the environment. It is amazing to have my artworks in conversation with some different artists from Asia and Africa. And to me, it's a great honor to be here, especially that my work is side by side with El Anatsui works because he is my hero.
I'm very happy to be part of this exhibition. I think this part of the world really needs to be spoken of or spoken about, where we are not getting much opportunities to showcase work in the larger. It speaks about the overlapping of our thought process and the politics and the environment we live into.
It's interesting to think about Africa and Asia, not as sort of very divergent places, but in the end, they share the burden and the memory of colonialism, of empire, of all the trauma that's embedded within that. And so many countries and so many cultures actually went through that trauma in the 70s and 80s and now. And so it's interesting to be able to, situate this work, within other artists grappling with these very intimate, these very painful, but very urgent histories.
We didn't want you to be led by a recognizable name. With so many artists in the exhibition, who those recognizable names might be will be different for each person. That's actually part of the discovery. There's something of the surprise encounter that I think is really encouraging here because many people leave having gravitated toward artists and artworks that they hadn't expressly come to see. So they came for one thing and they left with something else.
이번 전시는 저한테 매우 특별한 그 인상을 주고 있습니다. 아프리카, 아시아에서 활동하는 그 작가들이 서로 환경이나 역사는 다르지만은 그 그림이라고 하는 어느 이전의 시를 가지고 인간의 슬픔, 기쁨, 또 때로는 분노, 그리고 욕망까지도 다양하게 노래하고 있다는 점에서 그렇습니다.
Something that runs through all of these works, where it's relatable and it really goes back to our sense of humanity. Some could ask, why African art and Asian art? What are we doing? What is being done? And actually, I think the bigger question is, why haven't we done it so far until now? It's a rare show in that sense. I do hope we get to see more shows like this in the future.
Translations between different poetics, African and Asian poetics. I think it's a wonderful way of connecting the classical within East Asia with the global and the contemporary.
Art history is meant to create a sort of a critical distance, but again, we're constantly asking the questions of who gets seen and heard in art history. With this exhibition, there was a very exciting opportunity provided by the Institutum as a nonprofit organization to rethink who gets heard and how, and what types of conversations could be had.